The question of the day, can you be de-anonymized on TOR? There's a lot of non-techie guesses about the security of TOR. I'll try to explain the truth of TOR use coming up. Is TOR perfect? No, far from it. But even with potential flaws, the risk of using TOR depends on what you're trying to accomplish. Which also translates to understanding who the opposition is. Is the opposition a government three-letter agency? Is the opposition a bad guy? Is the goal just to keep your privacy in general and be free from profiling and preventing some entity from capturing your thoughts? I've seen some YouTube videos from TOR fanboys. Or the other side, which are people so opposed to TOR but offer no alternatives. There's a disconnect here. The disconnect is that the value of TOR depends on what you use it for, and so there's no one answer. The founders of Silk Road, Pirate Bay, Dream, and other TOR darknet sites have been arrested by the FBI. So TOR must not be secure. That's a bad example because, again, no one explained how those bad players were discovered even while using TOR. Let me give you a list of 6 flaws of TOR and how it can be beaten. Let me also suggest right now that just because there's a way to get around TOR doesn't mean it should concern you. We'll discuss that all at the end of the video. Flaw number 1, timing analysis. The Silk Road guy, Ross Ulbricht, was found not by decrypting TOR, but by something called a timing analysis or a timing attack. To be clear, the only entities capable of a timing analysis would be a government. An entity that can get access to all inputs and outputs to the internet. Now, Ulbricht is a bad guy. He was involved in a darknet marketplace that dealt with drugs, money laundering, sex trafficking, and even murder. He was targeted for surveillance, not just mass surveillance. Ulbricht would post in a public site using TOR. His identity was unknown at the time, but there's a timestamp of his post on the public site. So it would be a simple matter for the government to isolate which part of the country was using the internet at that same moment. This would be a multi-step process of narrowing down, perhaps by targeting larger zones, and as there are repeated instances to track, they narrow it down to the city level. And this is narrowed down even further by an existing watch list. In the case of Ulbricht, he was already on the watch list. Once they had a general idea of a city, then all they had to do was watch all the traffic from their suspect list in a particular city. And if the internet emissions from the location matched the time of the public post, then they just confirmed the guy. This approach does not allow for automated identification of an individual. Manual tracking had to be done to confirm a timing of transactions. And in this case, a public post attributed to Ulbricht could verify the suspect. And then, of course, a warrant is served and all the computers would be found. The important takeaway here is that in no case was TOR itself decrypted. Flaw number 2, denial of service. The next type of attack on TOR could be from a government entity once again. If large numbers of dissidents in a country were using TOR, a nation state could easily attack a hidden TOR service and thus causing a denial of service to a website being accessed by dissidents. If a large enough nation did it, an attack could be made on all TOR servers, since there's only 6,000 of them. This is a risk, though once again it results in denial of service and not de-anonymization. So far, this scenario hasn't happened. Flaw number 3, exit node, man in the middle. It is assumed that many exit nodes could be owned by the three-letter agencies. There are approximately 800 exit nodes out of 6,000 TOR nodes. I would believe this assumption. In fact, I expect it, and I think Snowden acknowledged this fact too. An exit node could act as a man in the middle on Tor and watch the traffic go through because the decryption occurs on the exit node. However, this is no longer a productive method of attack today because most people use HTTPS or TLS, so the first leg is encrypted. This is even true of email, thus the percentage of data acquired is small. And since exit nodes constantly change, the likelihood of even getting a complete message on a spying exit node is lessened. Just because the traffic is an MITM still doesn't identify the original party, since there's no IP address and the sending party mostly uses HTTPS for encryption. A more productive attack would be to just listen to the traffic in general and then spot unencrypted traffic. For example, server email traffic, which is completely unencrypted, even if you pass it through Tor. Is there a chance that someone could de-anonymize you from an exit node? Just follow simple precautions. When on Tor, always go to encrypted websites, HTTPS, and have encrypted conversations. Never go to a website that has some sort of form or login that is not HTTPS. We already get a browser warning when we go HTTP. Flaw number 4, device fingerprinting. I showed you in a prior video how someone can do a device fingerprint even while on Tor. Now, a device fingerprint does not in itself identify you, however, it identifies a device repeatedly. And then, this can be used to match to behaviors. And once you're identified by some other factor like location, then you're de-anonymized. Device fingerprinting is a bigger issue when not using Tor because of the IP address, but it may still be possible to get a location fix. The solution to this is to always disable location. And there are specific apps that can override the location settings to track you anyway, such as the Facebook app. This is why I always say that nothing can really protect you if you're using Facebook. Running Tor and using Facebook are completely conflicting objectives. One tries to hide your identity and the other tries its hardest to reveal it. Device fingerprinting is a huge issue primarily with Google and Facebook, and they're the few that can track your activities all over the internet. But more so with Facebook when using Tor. Flaw number 5, public central repository of nodes. All Tor nodes are identified in a central repository. They're not a secret. When you start a Tor session, the Tor client will go to the Tor servers and get a list of the nodes and select from there. There are possible attacks that could occur, including redirecting the Tor DNS to a compromised server. Or some large entity could do a denial of service on most of the Tor nodes, or even just target the fast Tor nodes. A DDoS attack would again deny access to Tor but not cause de-anonymization. In theory, it may be possible to change the list of nodes so that you end up using an opposition preferred entry node, maybe because they own it. Tor tends to reuse the same entry node over and over though, so this is mostly minimized. But it is a possible form of attack, especially if your current entry node is no longer available on a new node list. But this kind of attack would be discovered very quickly. It would also be so sophisticated that it can only be done by a state player, like a 3-letter agency. Flaw number 6, surveillance at entry points. This is one of the attacks being done by China. They use something called deep packet inspection. Instead of just letting traffic go through automatically, each packet is examined for more specifics than just a destination IP address. Each packet includes a port number. Tor by default uses UDP and a specific port like 1194. So in China, they just firewall this traffic, likely at the ISP level. There's a workaround to this, using bridge proxies where Tor can be made to look like Skype or some other service. This can also be overcome by using a VPN before connecting to Tor. However, this will not work in China since they block VPNs there as well. In summary, you're getting the picture that a state-level player can cause Tor to be vulnerable, particularly in a smaller country like in the Middle East, where they can easily monitor internet trunk traffic. The problem is that in some places where dissidents are tracked and surveilled, they also have few alternatives to getting freedom of speech. So what's the conclusion? Clearly, nation-state adversaries are formidable. They can mostly shut down the use of Tor in their country, as demonstrated in China and countries in the Middle East. Tor users could be de-anonymized, though it would be a massive effort and require complete control of the internet infrastructure. This is a bit more problematic to accomplish in the United States, where ISPs are private companies. But what's clear is that for those using Tor for privacy and not for criminal activity, there is little risk. It basically eliminates mass surveillance, and it makes it a difficult manual project to identify what's going on with each individual user. In none of the cases is there a risk of some entity seeing your actual content on Tor. They can at best see the IP address you connected to and that you're using Tor. They still can't tell what you're doing. However, I accept the fact that the metadata showing you using Tor can be an issue. Perhaps that can be addressed in an easier way than manually configuring a limited supply of Tor bridges, which is the solution today. This is the same type of risk shown when using I2P, the Invisible Internet Project, which is more of an anonymized darknet. Unfortunately, I2P is not as popular as Tor, and fewer users can translate to easier mass surveillance tracking of its user base. The solution in the long run is for more and more people to utilize Tor. The more people on it, the less the value the metadata has. The more average people concerned about privacy using Tor, the safer Tor is for the rest of us. The more bad guy Tor darknet people they arrest, the less the anonymizing platform becomes a haven for more bad guys. This should be more of a platform for freedom of speech, for dissidents, for journalists, for whistleblowers, for those seeking truth. Speech that is not mass surveilled. I hope I've been frank and open here. I still believe in Tor for the average folks. Just understand the risks. Thanks for watching, and as always, please subscribe to my YouTube channel. I appreciate it. The YouTube algorithm appreciates it as well, and it will decide if other people should watch this. So please help it decide.